a lot of my life, I did a lot of things, but I did things out of reaction because I had to do those things. And I love to embrace change and I love to embrace things that are different and challenges. And I do projects. I keep myself busy on things. I homeschooled my kids for 15 years. It was challenging. I would go and do home improvement projects, things that would stretch me to a point. But now in this next season of life, to go and try, as you mentioned, I go and try things. I had to face a lot of fears before I could go and break out of where I was to go try the new things. And I think once I realized that my fears and my limiting beliefs were the real things that were holding me back, it's not that I couldn't try those things or do those things. It was that I had these certain set of mindset that was keeping me from actually pursuing my authentic self.
What a pleasure to be joined by my friend Sue Saller. Sue, welcome. And yeah, it's great to see you.
Hey, great to see you again too, Lawrence. I am very, very excited to get a chance to talk to my good friend. So I'm just ready to jump right in.
Awesome. Well, let me start with this, Sue, because I think it'll give people a bit of background to you. If I was talking to your 22-year-old self right now, how would she describe herself and her life? Circumstances.
At 22, oh my gosh. At 22, I was, let's see, I was married at 22 and just starting out my career as a math teacher. And we were just going through just beginning life and just trying to figure things out. And you know what? I would say at 22, my life was pretty much pointless. You became a teacher and then that was it, and so much, much different, a lot of life happening between that time and where I am today.
What about your mindset? Would you have been like, were you resigned? Like you felt like this is my lot in life? Were you excited? What was your mindset?
Yeah, at that time, no. At 22, well, you have to put it in context for those listening. I'm 52 now. So at 22, we're going back, you can do the math, 32 years, 30 years, right? So back then, mindset and personal agency and taking control of your life and doing things that you want to do, that wasn't my experience. Now, I'm not saying that's what it was like back then for everybody across the board. Me personally, I felt, and I was trapped in this world where I felt I had to please everybody around me. So I did what everybody else wanted me to do, not necessarily what Sue wanted to do. And my first husband I met when I was 14. I was married at 20. And pretty quickly I realized, oh, wait a minute, that probably wasn't the best decision for me. And I wanted to experience life differently, but now I had a relationship. I was now in a marriage and I couldn't live the authentic life that I wanted to live. Now, back then, I wouldn't have had that type of mindset and I wouldn't have had that type of language around it like I do today. So it was much, 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 much different back then. And I would say for a good part of that first marriage, I felt trapped. Like I just wasn't able to live the life that I really wanted to live. So to kind of frame it in that time say.
No, that was great. And the reason I asked that is because there's a wonderful book that I've just reread called With the End in Mind by Catherine Maddox. And she's a hospice nurse and she's talking to all these people at the end of their life and she's helping them and their families deal with their passing. And these themes keep coming up among the people she's helping at the end of their life. And one of them was, I wished I had lived a life that was authentic to me as opposed to what people expected of me. And having talked to you previously and knowing a little bit about your background, it seemed that you kind of felt like this is my lot in life and this is it. Like I can't really follow my dreams. This is what's expected of me. And I guess when I look back at my life, I think I think my parents were they were almost like old school hippies, I guess. I was almost raised myself. but I also had that same expectation that I didn't think it was possible for me just to, I wanted to take a few years off after college and just travel and enjoy life before I started my career. But I was like, I got a job opportunity and I thought, this is what I have to do. I'm an adult now. I have to make money. I have to support myself. I didn't even think about any other
Yeah.
options. And I feel like people growing up today, and especially now your kids are a bit older, I wonder what kind of mindset they have. There's so much more possibilities to be entrepreneurs now and do side hustles and things like that. So it's interesting to look back at both of us. We can look back at our youth now with the wisdom and the vocabulary that we have today that of course we wouldn't have had back then.
Oh yeah, 100%. I agree 100%. My kids, interestingly enough, have been watching my journey from afar over the last, well, last maybe decade or so, when they've been more in their adult years and being able to be more cognizant of what was going on in my first marriage and to watch how that played out. And I did get divorced. I did get remarried, and in the process of separating again for much more amicably than the first one. But the kids are watching from afar, and they see their mom now just stepping out and being the person who she really wanted to be. And I think a lot of what I'm doing is for them to a point so that they can see that, you don't have to live this trapped life. You don't have to live a life of complacency and they knew I really wasn't a risk taker. But now, like, I'll just go out and do something like really wild that is totally different than what they would have expected me to do. And I think that's the exciting part. It's just the example that I'm setting for them, and to say, you know what, you can go live an amazing life too. You don't have to settle, and you're not stuck right where you are. And I think that's the biggest thing I've learned over the last couple of years in facing my fears and going forward and taking those risks, is that I don't have to stay where I am anymore, and that there's a whole world out there available to me if I just open my eyes and embrace what comes my way. So
I was going to say that expression, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And I think I just heard a very established therapist say that expression is meaningless, because you can keep learning any age in life, but it does definitely becomes a bit harder as we get older. I've noticed that with myself. You do tend to take a few less risks as you get older, and you get more established in certain patterns, and your life tends to go in certain directions. And it is harder, but we can still make changes. And I think your story is great because you've made so many changes just in the last few years. And it could have been easy for you to say, well, this is, resign. This is my love life. And you haven't. You've seen that there's all these possibilities open to you. And I think that's my favorite message about you is it's never too late. And look how much happier you are now when you're really following your own passions and you're taking risks and you're being bold. Because if I look back at my life, I don't regret any of my failures. I just have regrets if I didn't try something. And I think that your testament to that is you're really living an authentic life, and you're trying it. Of course, when you try things and you be bold, it's not always going to be an amazing, flourishing success. But at least, when all's said and done, I'll never regret trying.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things out of that. I love what you said about this idea of trying, and that in a lot of my life, I did a lot of things, but I did things out of reaction because I had to do those things. And I love to embrace change, and I love to embrace things that are different and challenges. And I do projects. I keep myself busy on things. I homeschooled my kids for 15 years. It was challenging. I would go and do home improvement projects, things that would stretch me to a point. But now in this next season of life, to go and try, as you mentioned, the idea I go and try things, I had to face a lot of fears before I could go and break out of where I was to go try the new things. And I think once I realized that my fears and my limiting beliefs were the real things that were holding me back, it's not that I couldn't try those things or do those things. It was that I had this certain set of mindset that was keeping me from actually pursuing my authentic self. So when I did the personal development, I really pressed in I would say it started about 2.5 years ago, but really this last year of just going through this process of coaching, personal coaching, self-awareness, and really taking a hard look at who I am as a person and say, you know what? The fears that I have about doing X, Y, or Z, whatever it was, those fears, the fears themselves probably weren't going to come true. And so when I started telling myself, and it wasn't denial, it's like things that can happen are real, right? But it wasn't an all-out denial. But it was more like, wait a minute, these fears that I have that are just bothering me aren't really going to happen. So I started to deal with those, and as they dissipated, I began to take more risk, and I started to enjoy life a little bit more. And the other thing that you said that caught me was this. You said I did a lot of hard things. And I had somebody mention to me one time that they take hard things and they do it with ease. So when I look at something that's quote unquote hard to do, if I say to myself, I'm going to do this thing with ease, it makes what it is I'm going to do lighter. Mm-hmm. What I love about the English language is that you can play around with it. And it's not, like I said, it's not in a manipulative, false way. It's just in a way that actually you can reframe how you think. So if you think about the word easy and hard, something that's easy to me might be difficult to you. And something that's difficult for you might be easy for me. So easy and hard, it's like, why do we even ascribe that to something? It's more like, okay, I want to take this challenge. Let me go after the challenge and run after it. And it's like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. It's not easy or hard. It's just another mountain to climb. So it's a matter of perspective, and it's what you're telling yourself. The stories that we tell ourselves actually determine where you go and how you look at things. So what seems hard to others actually was easy to me. And I think the one thing about my story that I really want people to understand is that I used to think I couldn't change. I used to think I was stuck right where I was. And when I let go of that belief and I said, you know what, that's not true anymore. I can do whatever I want. It started to become a game changer for me. And I came across a quote that I recite to myself that helps to encourage me. And the quote is, and I can't remember what book it's from, but I read it in a book, and it says, wanting is about abundance and creation and requires no justification. And when I came across that, wanting is about abundance and creation and requires no justification, that was so freeing to me, because I wanted to change the life that I had at the time I came across that quote. And it's about living an abundant life and about creating the life that you want. And the last part that says requires no justification was the game changer for me, because I lived my life having to justify to people, oh, I'm going to buy this car because, oh, I'm moving to this house because, oh, I'm doing this because I think you should, that you think I should do that. It was justifying why I would do everything I would do. And when you realize that I want that thing, I don't have to justify it to anyone why I want that thing. Now, I know that's general, and it can come with a lot of qualifiers because, are you married or you're not? Do you have kids or whatever? But I think in general, if you think about it and about creating the life that you want, you can do that within the confines of the life that you have. But it's just creating that life that's authentic to you. And maybe if you have a partner, creating that life with them. That makes sense.
No, totally. But one thing I love what you said about the English language, because I was actually with a really good friend of mine. He was actually the first podcast I ever did. He was my number one guest. And I was saying something and he corrected my language because in the way I was framing it was a bit negative. And it was just such a good reminder, because I do that to my friends too. When they say something in a pessimistic way, I was like, words have power. I have one of my best friends here. He always says these self-deprecating jokes. And I'm like, it's not really funny, because it is, even though you're joking and it's in jest, it's still self-deprecating, and you shouldn't, words do have power. You shouldn't talk like that. Mm-hmm. So I'm I'm glad you brought that up. And then the other thing you said about, difficult and easy. one thing I've noticed is when I was young, I thought if I front load the difficulties of my life, I'll reach some wonderful utopia where life is going to be easy and I can just sit on the beach and do nothing. And now I'm a bit older, I realize that number one, I don't want to have an easy life because I don't think it's a good lesson for my young son. But also, I think that every day, like my personal philosophy is every day has to be one. So I want to get some type of exercise that most days I honestly don't feel like doing because I have that inner laziness and my back's sore and my energy's low. But I know if I do it, I'll feel so much better, you know? So it's that idea of just doing something hard every day. I think you have to earn the Netflix or earn that nice dinner or whatever it is, earn the date night with my wife. And so that's just, again, reframing things the way you see it. Like, I don't have to dread doing hard things. I just say, for as long as I live, I hope that I can do something hard every day because it makes the rest of my day sweeter.
Yeah. So something you said was interesting and about doing hard things and then rewarding yourself. Do you find that you struggle with celebrating the accomplishments that you do, that you have? I find it a curious question because sometimes we just don't like when you go back to that hard or easy, you know, oh, that was easy for me to do, might be hard for somebody else. But then are you really taking time to embrace the accomplishment?
Mhm. Well, I've noticed, like, if I look at travel, one of the reasons my wife and I absolutely love Hawaii, and of course, you'll say, well, of course, Hawaii is beautiful. But one of the reasons I realize is because when we go, it tends to be a very active vacation. So I have a couple of good friends that own jiu-jitsu gyms. So a lot of time I'll hit a jiu-jitsu session in the morning. You know, I love to swim. You're outside, you're walking around a lot, you do a lot of hiking. And I realized that by being physically active and not just like some people, they say, I want to go on vacation. I just want to just go to an all inclusive and eat and drink all day and do nothing. And I've realized that when I do that, I just don't feel good. I think it comes down to the fact of just like, I like to reward myself. So I think I do a good job of celebrating, but I have to do the hard things first. And I think it's just, it's been really good for me, for my mind to know that that works for me. I think we all have to find what works for us, right? But I think if I found that works for me, so I have to do something a little bit difficult, and then the rest of the day feels sweeter. If I do it a bit earlier in the day, then I probably have the benefits, whether it's the endorphins or just the feeling of accomplishment or whatever it is. I'll have that the whole of the day. So that's a really nice feeling. Another thing you talked about, which I think is fascinating, Sue, is the concept of fear. And when you know, the former greatest, you know, one of the greatest heavyweight boxers of all time, Mike Tyson, when he was young, he was this incredibly physically gifted kid. When he was 13, he looked like an adult already. People were like, "There's no way that kid's 13." He was so naturally muscular and athletic, but he had real problems with his mindset. He grew up in a real tough home. And his boxing coach, Custamato, he said to him, he'd always talk to him about fear, and he would say, "Fear is the friend of exceptional people." And if you channel it and you use it wisely, you can do great things. And I think that's another thing too, is I don't think that you get to a stage where you become fearless. I think if someone doesn't feel fear, he's kind of silly. It's almost like those people that don't feel pain, the kids, and they'll like burn themselves really badly because they don't have the pain receptors in their hand. They'll touch a hot stove or something. So I think we shouldn't seek to become fearless. A lot of the time, fear will tell us almost the direction we need to go. So I know that whenever I'm faced with kind of a pivotal road in your life, it's like a lot of the time, the one that I'm more fearful for going towards, I always ask myself, would my future self in 10 years rather I take the hard path that I'm fearing or the not so hard path? And normally fear shows you where you need to go, because then you're going to grow from it.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I had to really work hard to face my fears and then realize, and you know, the interesting thing, it really, my relationship with fear started to evolve more when I started getting more into my podcast and started looking for guests and topics to talk about. This is really early on. My podcast has been going for a year and a half now. And in the very beginning, as you know, like when you start a podcast, it's like you're just getting going. It's like, who's going to be my guest? What are you going to talk about? Things like that. And I had a guest on, it's a friend of mine, Dr. Dave Powers. And he is a medical doctor. He also used to be on an ambulance and a firefighter and was in the military and everything. And I thought, wow, here's a guy that knows fear. Right. So I started asking him questions about fear. And then from there, I started just researching fear itself, because I realized in my own life, I had a lot of fear. And I didn't do things and I didn't live a real rich life because I always wanted to take things cautious. And, I was afraid of losing my job, or I was afraid of, what's going to happen if I do this or if I do that. And I came to learn from Dave, really, that fear and excitement are different sides of the same coin. And that physiologically, fear and excitement in the body produce the same response, same physical response. And that the only difference is how the mind perceives what it is that's going on. So my hack for myself is that, if I'm fearful, I'm like, okay, I acknowledge it's fearful. I'm afraid of something, but then I turn it around and I say, okay, I'm excited. Because my body doesn't know the difference. It's like when you're afraid of something, instead of saying calm down or you're excited, like lean into that excitement because your body is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. So it's like getting your mind and the spiritual, your mindset in tune with the actual physical that's happening. So doing that, that fear factor. Not that I don't have fear. It's just that I'm learning, like you said, to channel it differently and to use it in such a way that it produces an amazing result. And so I like the quote that you had about, like fear is something that you're going to lean into because then it's going to produce, it's putting you in that direction. There's a great quote that actually it came out of the book, The Quitter's Manifesto by, I think Pat Hyben and Tim Rode wrote it. And I have it on my TV here, and it says, "Fear of quitting isn't a sign of danger." So we're talking about leaving your job, but it really applies to anything. Fear of quitting isn't a sign of danger; it's a signpost pointing the way. It's like when you're afraid of something, it's like maybe like that's the direction really you need to go in. So this relationship with fear has been interesting, especially with a lot of, like you said, I've had a lot of life transitions the last couple of years.
So that idea of fear and excitement being two sides of the same coin, I'll give you the perfect analogy that I learned the hard way. So I had about 25 amateur boxing fights and 10 professional MMA fights. And throughout all of those, every single morning I'd wake up on the day of the contest and I'd be like, I wish I didn't have to do this. I had just so much anxiety. I just wanted to get it over and done with. And then on the last one, when I knew I was going to retire, I said, okay, this is the last time I'm going to do this. I'm going to enjoy everything from the walkout music to I'm just going to breathe it in and really experience everything and be present and know that I'm never going to do this walk again for occasion. These are really going to be priceless memories. And thankfully the fight went well, but the experience was so different, Sue. I became so sad that I didn't have that mentality much earlier on because it would have been just so much of a more enjoyable journey. I used to get so much anxiety before, and if it was like 3-4 weeks before, I would think, I wish I could just click my fingers and it'd be like that movie Click. I don't know if you see it, where you just fast forward your life 4 weeks because I just didn't want to deal with the thought all the time, oh, I've got to do this. And I wish I could have just fast forwarded that period of my life. That when I changed my mindset, it was actually a beautiful experience. And I still think of those memories today. They were so clear. Whereas all the other fights are like a hodgepodge of just anxiety and emotions and vague memories. And it's all a bit hazy. And I just think that's such a great point. It's just reframing what it is, because you're right. I remember my first date with my now wife. I was so excited. We've been talking a month and we've both been traveling and we were finally having our first date. And I was already in love with her personality. And I was so nervous. I was like, I hope we're going to have a good chemistry and she's going to like me and all this stuff. And it was that exact same feeling in your stomach that I would get walking out to a competition. It's that same feeling. It's excitement or nerves. So you're right. Yeah. It's such a good thing to program.
Yeah. It's great. It's great to lean into that. I mean, it's interesting how, like we were talking about words, reframing those words and how your mindset goes into situations. As you were talking, I was thinking about being present, how you were saying like the other boxing matches where you knew they weren't your last ones and you had all this anxiety and you went, but the last one, you were present. And, when we look at our circumstances and we live them in the past, or we try and take our life and extend out to the future, we miss what's right in front of us. A friend of mine told me once, he said, if we live in the past, it produces depression. If we live for the future, it produces anxiety. If we live for the now, it produces calm and peace because you're in the now, and to embrace that. And I know me personally, I've lived most of my life either in regret, or fear or rumination, looking back. And then when I actually brought myself to the present, I would go to what is it going to be like in the future? What do I have to do? Like, is it really going to be this bad? Is it going to stay this way for the rest of my life? And so it's a lousy way to live, to be honest. It's really through discipline. For me personally, I read the book called The Surrender Experiment, which was the big game changer for me. And just reading about Michael Singer's life and going through that book and how he surrendered to the moment and then watched how life unfolded for him, I thought, well, what do I have to lose? Why am I trying to live life in the past because you can't change it? Why am I trying to manipulate the future, but I have no control over it? What if I just surrendered to what came to me? And when I started doing that, life started opening up, and the opportunities that came my way and the experiences that came my way allowed me to press into my authentic self and who I really wanted to become. And then it allowed my life to unfold in a way that, regardless of what came my way, easy or hard, doesn't matter, I was able to live in that moment, embrace it, use it, and then go forward. So that now, that present, and experiencing that, I think it's just so valuable. So
that phrase, don't live in the past, don't worry about the future, just be in the moment. It's such an easy thing to say, or an easy concept, but living it is just so difficult. But you're right. I used to always think I've been quite lucky because I think I had a lot of failures in my life, in my past, but I've never really been one to suffer from regret. But the problem I've had is I've always said, like, if I can just do this, then I'll be happy. If I can just do this, then I'll never have money problems again. If I can just get this, I'll never have this problem. So it was always, if I can just get here in the future, then I'll be happy. And it was only about a year ago when it was last summer, I was at my good friend's bachelor party in Mexico. And I was all my friends were drinking and having a wild time. And I was just on the water by myself. And I was like, this is such a bad way to live life. I realized that if I thought about everything I could possibly hope to accomplish in the next 10, 20 years, if I have to wait till I'm in my 60s or 70s, whether I accomplish them or not, I've missed life. I can't live like that where I've got to stop saying, if I can just get here in my life, I'll be happy. And I vowed from then on to know that I'll do my best, whatever life throws at me in the future, but to enjoy the journey and be happy with the now. And that made a huge difference in my happiness level. It was that little mindset shift. And again, I was mid-40s when I thought that. And I was like, man, why didn't I think about this when I was in my mid-20s? To take time to learn these lessons.
I think it does take time to learn these lessons. But you know what? Here's the interesting thing, because I was challenged one time, and I was talking to a good friend of mine, and I said, I wish I hadn't done that, or I wish I had changed and maybe not gotten there. I got married when I was 20, and it was really young, and I would say, oh, I wish I hadn't done that, kind of going down that regret road. And the friend I was talking to, he said to me, he said, Sue, he said, why be stuck living in regret? Because every experience that you've had in your life from that moment, from, young age, whatever, from 14 on, getting married at a young age. I have 3 kids. I got divorced, got remarried in the process of separating again. And, just looking at that whole time frame, he said, all those experiences have shaped who you are today and brought you to the moment where you are today. And he said, if you had not experienced those things, maybe you wouldn't be able to help other people who are walking through those same experiences, or be able to speak wisdom into somebody else's life, or get you to the point where you are right now, or to have you realize that, to have experiences in life of things that you don't want, help you to see when the right thing comes along. Sometimes we look at those negative experiences, or we say, oh, geez, I shouldn't have been in that friendship or that relationship. And you look at it like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I regret that. All of those experiences are opportunities to learn, to help you to understand what maybe it is that you don't want in life, so that when the right thing does come along, you're able to spot it and recognize it, because it's the opposite of what you had just experienced. So I really try and reframe how it is, or what I say to myself when I look at my past, and take it out of that regret mode. So my book is coming out, and I know you published a book as well. My book's coming out on October 1st, which might be after this recording, might be after that time frame, but it's fine. And in my book, I have a whole chapter dedicated to regret. And I open the chapter with, regret is a thief, and if you let it, it will steal your life. And fortunately, I got to this point where I lived so much in regret. I realized how much of my life I had wasted living in regret, So if you let it, it's going to be a thief. So once I let regret go and I say, okay, this isn't something where I want to live anymore, it's very freeing, extremely freeing. And it was. If you let it, it'll be that thief that'll steal the joy of your moment, of where you are. Because you can't change the past anyway, right? We think we can, but we can't.
Sue, that's so true. Daniel Pink wrote a book on regret, which my friend just gave it to me, and he said, I know you don't have anything to regret, Lawrence, but this is a great book. That's what he told me when he gave it to me. And I said, actually, I do have so many things that, of course, if I had today's wisdom, I would have done things differently. But I don't think I have regret, because I think it's made me a more complex person, and I've grown from it. And I'll give you one example. I always think I've made an obscene amount of money in my young career, but I've also made every mistake, and I've been very unlucky, and I've had people rip me off and all these different things. So I don't have too much to show for it. And it used to be a source of regret, one of my many regrets. And then I thought about it, and I thought, wow, if 10 years ago I had put a couple of $100 or $1,000 in Bitcoin, and I was a Bitcoin multimillionaire, I would have missed out on 10 years of growth. And I've grown so much as a person, and I wouldn't change that for the world. And I think that's the idea, is if you think about who are the people you admire in life, who do you look up to? I would be very surprised if there are people that didn't make a bunch of mistakes and learn and grow from them. And so I think I love what you said about regret being a thief, because it takes from today. And again, the idea of reframing is just so powerful, because I guess that's the Stoic philosophy, isn't it? It's not what your life is about, that it's about your mindset towards that gives you a good, good head on your shoulders, that's going to make you happy. So I got to stop thinking, if I get this, I'll be happy. And no, I'm going to choose to be happy, and I'm going to do my best. And regret doesn't have any part of it. It's, like you said, learning experiences.
Right. I love what you said about happiness being a choice. Because we tend to put happiness on things, we put happiness on experiences, and happiness tends to be one of these things that it's almost like a bully in the schoolyard. It draws a line, you come up to it, and you think once you achieve that thing, it's like, oh, I'll be happy when. And happiness, if we take happiness off of an experience and we put it into, like you said, making it a choice and making it a disposition or a mindset, I'm going to choose to be happy and content in whatever situation I have, and find the good in everything, even in the bad stuff. And I'm not one of those people that deny bad things. I'm not like that. I'm not like, if something really crappy happens to you, you have to deal with that. I mean, life is full of traumatic events. Life is full of, unexpected turns. I'm not one of those, I don't deny that, but and you have to deal with that. But every opportunity is everything that happens is an opportunity for you to make a choice on how it is that you choose to look at that. And I mean, one of the most profound moments for me, and I still have to remind myself of this, is remembering that everything that I do is 100% a choice. You know, I choose to look at a circumstance a certain way. I choose to respond. I make the choice to do X, Y, and Z. And when I realize that it's 100% my choice, it allows me to take the expectations off of everybody outside of me, if that makes sense. You know, I don't have to worry about somebody's response to what I do because that's their choice. You know, if I want to make the choice, how I respond, I can only control how I respond myself. And it's funny because I used to live life thinking that I could control my circumstances. And I mean, I'm a perfectionist at heart. And with that comes the control. And when you realize, and like I didn't realize this last year, really, after I read the book, The Surrender Experiment, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to let control. I'm just not going to try and control things that I can't control anymore. And that's so freeing when you give yourself that permission to not take the responsibility to control things you can't control. So we think we can control those things, but we can't.
That was definitely when I was young. I had the mindset that it's a very like fighter mindset. Like I'm going to try and fight my way through life and fight for the life I want. And the older I get, the more I realize that you can do your best, but life is like an ocean with rolling waves. And sometimes you're on top of the wave surfing beautifully. Another time the wave is crashing over your head and you're getting just smashed to pieces. And I think so having that, I couldn't agree more. You said it so well. One thing in regret, actually, I wrote this down because I knew we were going to talk about regret, but it was from that book by Daniel Pink. And he said, if we know what people regret the most, we can reverse that image to reveal what they value the most. So that's why I love the idea of looking at people and reading books about people at the end of their life. Because if they say, you know, one thing I really regret is I spent too many late nights in the office and I miss my kids growing up, then I think about that every day and I say, I'll always prioritize spending, you know, and like just before, one of the reasons I was a few minutes late is because I took my son and my dogs to a park and hung out with him for an hour and I got caught in a bit of traffic coming home. But it's like I had work to do, but I knew that the work can wait. I can do it later. I can do it after we talk. I can do it after dinner. But I only had an hour when it was still daylight to be with him. And so I really think about that a lot. I try, what can I do today and how can I live every day so that when all's said and done, I'll have the least amount of regret. So I think regret is such a thief of the present. It's such a waste that the idea of regret is a very powerful one for how to frame a really flourishing life.
I love that. Allowing that to be in the moment too, and to take regret and, you know, reframe it because you can't change it. I mean, that was that. And when I lived in, you know, I spent a lot of my life living in regret and the reason I did it is because I thought, well, if the next time it happens, I'm going to change the outcome. And you live in this loop where you think, okay, I'm going to try and recreate that experience again so that I don't have to make that same mistake and live in regret. And it really, Lawrence, to be honest with you, it came while I was writing my book that I realized that, oh my God, you're never going to experience the same circumstance again. I used to think I could recreate it. Like if something, I don't know, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but it's like you lived through a thing, you regretted your action, you want the thing to repeat itself in the same conditions that caused you to have the first response the first time. Does that make sense? Like you're looking to recreate the same exact, and I used to think, and I don't even know why I would even think this, but I used to wrongly think that I'm going to recreate that thing again.
And do it the right way this time.
It'll never happen. Yeah. And then do it right so that I can make it right and be perfect. And somewhere in the course of writing my book, And like I said, writing my book was extremely cathartic for me because it was just a release of many, many years of pent up anxiety and situations and circumstances and deep thinking. Anyway, in writing that book, I realized, wait a minute, you are never, ever going to recreate the same condition twice. It's just not how life works.
It's
You can
like
have circumstances that are like the same, but they're not going to be the same.
there's that phrase from, I think it's Herman Hesse, the book Siddhartha, and he said, "No man steps in the same river twice because he is not the same man and he is not the same river." And it's the same kind of point as you're making that, to think like that is just wasted thought. One thing you did write about was the idea of the stories that we tell ourselves. And I thought that was so interesting. I started to think about my own life. And you talked about when you were really young and you were in school and you thought some girls were kind of bullying you and push you up a wall. That for all you know, they could have been giggling about something else. And it's like, it's very easy when you're in those kind of situations, especially when you're a kid and your brain's still developing, to misconstrue a certain situation. And then you'll carry that story for decades. And I thought that was that for me was a really powerful concept, because I thought about all the stories that I've been telling myself based on random events 35 years ago. And I thought that was really, really powerful.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. I mean, actually, I have to give my coach credit for that, because coaching is what really was a game changer for me. And most of my book, like a good part of my book, talks about my coaching experience, but then it also talks about the post-traumatic growth that I experienced. I went through a series of traumatic events, kind of the middle of last year, 2023, and then it was just a series of cascading events, one after another. And then in January of this year, I was challenged. They said, "Why don't you write a book?" And somebody challenged me to do that, and then another person, completely independent of the first, said the same thing to me. And I said, "Oh, well, maybe this is the universe telling me to go write a book." And that story came out of my coaching, and my coach really helped me overcome a lot of my regret through my stories. So as I started to unpack and coach with him week after week, I started to realize I carried around all this baggage, and some of it was for 40 years. I'm 52 now, so a lot of the stuff happened when I was younger. The story that you referenced about me being pushed off of, it was one of those jungle gym things that were high up off the ground, and a couple of kids had, what they did was they're like, "Oh, here, hey, Sue, come on up and sit on the edge, the very edge." Now, this piece of equipment will never be found today because it was a big liability. But I'm here on this. It's 6 feet off the ground. I'm here on this large 1 by 1, like square foot beam, right? And I do. I'm on the end, and I hear everybody laughing. And the next thing I know, since I was on the end, I wind up on the ground, and I was actually unconscious for I don't know how long, but I was unconscious on the ground. And the next thing I knew, I woke up. So the last thing I remembered was some giggling. But because my experience as a child was coupled with a lot of teasing and ridicule and ostracization, I just attributed the fact that they just wanted to hurt me, and then they pushed me off the ledge. And I told myself that story for decades. And it wasn't until my coach said, and I held the grudge too. Like I held on to that story, which is even more amazing and just baffling to me now that I look back at it. Like, why would I hold that story for that long and remember it? I mean, I still remember hitting the ground, it's just crazy. But he said to me, he said, maybe they weren't laughing at you. And I thought, oh my gosh, here I am. I'm taking a story and then I'm interjecting all these things that may or may not be true to develop a story around that. But that was the game changer. And then as I started to unpack other stories and I started to look at them differently, and it's not like I said, it's not in denial and rewriting the past. It's more like a recognition of maybe you don't accurately remember all that stuff, and giving yourself grace to let go what you don't accurately remember. I was 6 or 7, like, okay, how accurately could I have really remembered that that situation, right? So, and when he said to me, maybe they weren't laughing at me, I thought, wow, yeah, maybe not. So I took my stories and then I started unpacking them, all the ones that had power over me that I had held on to for a long time. And then through a process of journaling and then working through those stories through story work, I was able to come to a realization of acceptance, to accept those stories and then to release them. So there were a number of things that really were life changing for me. One was reading the Surrender Experiment. Another was just taking those stories and journaling them and working through them through breath work, through just really deep, deep journaling. I mean, like a lot of journal, like 100. My coach and I have a shared document that it's still is it still running? No, we stopped coaching for a little bit. We started coaching again. When we stopped coaching the first time, it was through, I think we coached 8 months together. It's a 160-page document of just my own journaling. So a lot of, and just a lot of introspection, reflection, and a lot of my book came out of those journaling sessions. And when I realized, oh, I have something here, something to share, the rest just fell into place.
So my wife's a therapist, and over the years, she's very subtly will have these conversations when we're both calm and there's no work to be done and our son's asleep. We'll have a conversation sometimes for an hour or two, and it's a very subtle. She's the therapist in her comes out, and she'll start talking about certain things, the way I act, and it's been really, really interesting because before I met her, I hadn't had any therapy. And I thought, oh, real men don't need therapy. Therapy's for people with a weak mind or have a strong mind. But the mind is just like the body. And the more we understand it and the more we can harness it, the happier we're going to be and the better life we're going to live. And I've come to this deep realization that it's been such a blessing marrying her, not just meeting her, not just the fact that I think we're compatible, but the fact that I do have, I live with a therapist and she's helped me see all these different things that I was doing and these habits. And like you, most of them came from my youth, and it's been really refreshing. And it's so kind of to take this full circle. It comes back to the fact that I've learned so much about myself and the way I see things just in the last couple of years that have made an incredible impact on my happiness levels. And I think it was Neville Ravikant, who's one of my favorite philosophers. He said something like, the real test of intelligence is crafting the life that you want. And I think so many people think, oh, if I can get this prestige and this money and this success, I'll be happy. And then at the end of their life, they realize that doesn't really matter. When you're on your deathbed, the things that are going to matter is, the people you spend a lot of time with, your family, your close friends. The opinion of 1 million random people on Instagram is going to be irrelevant to you. And that's been it's been so wonderful, kind of gaining that clarity. And I think it's both of us can attest the fact that it's never too late to work with yourself, to be introspective and journal and ask yourself things and kind of figure out all these stories that we have and create a better mindset for life. And I think that's really refreshing.
Yeah, I love what you said. I want to bounce off of the one phrase you just said, it's never too late. And what I want to share with people who are listening is that, I think I've mentioned it before, I'm 52 and I've come across a lot of my friends. Some of them are older, a lot older. And I was a financial advisor for a number of years and I had a lot of clients in their 50s and 60s. And I think one of the saddest things that I came across was people with fixed mindsets where they thought that, oh, I'm 55, I'm 50, like I'm stuck here. And what I want people to hear in my story and my message is that I have radically transformed my life. And I tell everybody, I'm just getting started. I'm so excited about life and embracing what's in front of me versus where I was even 2 years ago. Even last year, I hit the lowest point of my life, one of the very lowest points last July. And I mean, in my book, I talk about suicidal ideation. I struggled with that for many, 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 many years. And last year I hit the lowest point. But I brought myself back from there. Actually, my coach was also very instrumental in that. I'm still here, where I felt like I didn't want to be here anymore. Like, why bother living life? I can't change where I'm at. I'm stuck where I'm at. I don't love the life I am. This isn't my authentic self. And through coaching, through realization, through a lot of like a hard personal development, I'm in a much, much better place. Much better place. I turned my life around. So, what I want people to hear is that it is never too late. It's never too late to change where you are. And you and I talk we're a little older. We talk about regret, wishing we had gone through those things that, at a younger age. And, you can pass on that wisdom to those listening now. Like it's never, you always walk through what you have to walk through, and it helps you to develop who you are. So when you look at it from that perspective, the regret you don't have to live there. But wherever you're at, you have the ability to change where you want to go. And when you embrace the fact that 100% of everything that's around you is your choice, then that empowers you. It moves you from that victim mentality to an empowerment mentality where it's like, you know what? I can create the life that I wanted. It might not happen overnight, but it'll eventually happen. And the other thing that, and I have to give my coach credit for this, I used to I still do live life with urgency, but I used to live life like my life is going to end tomorrow. And I also had, I was going to have to set things up and, oh my God, I'm 50 years old. And, I've got to be in this house by this time. And I didn't hit my money goal and things like that. And he said to me, he said, why don't you put your life on a 30-year time horizon or a 40-year time horizon and stretch it out? He said, what's another 6 months working a job you really hate if it gets you to where you really need to go? He's like, it's 6 months. And when he reframed it for me like that, it was a big game changer, Lawrence. It was like, oh, wait a minute. If I'm doing something that I don't really want to be doing right now, but I'm going to surrender to what life sends to me, I can do what I'm doing for a couple more months, and I can change that thing. I can put those small steps in place in order to help change my tomorrow. One of my most favorite quotes is, wanting is about abundance and creation and requires no justification. So I just want what I want. I don't have to justify myself anymore.
Well, the reason that was such great advice he gave you is because when we have longer time horizons, it gives us better perspective, right? Because we have more time for things. And by looking 100%. At things with a longer lens, it just puts things in their correct place. And man, that idea of perspective is so powerful. So I have to share a story. I was just in Italy last week with my family, and it was just we had a week, and we're in the Dolomites, the mountains in the north, and I've never been there, and it was just a slice of heaven. And we're actually meeting some friends who were there for a few days, and we were supposed to meet them at a place for lunch, and we got on the wrong lift up this mountain, and instead of arriving at the restaurant where we we're going to have lunch, we were an hour away. And I have a 3.5-year-old who had his first, it was an hour hike up steep mountains, and it was really hot, and I wasn't dressed for it, and I was sweating, and I was uncomfy, and my wife was kind of bickering a bit with me. She's like, because she was blaming me for getting the wrong gondola up the mountain. And I remember I don't want to say feeling sorry for myself, but kind of just like a little grumpy. And then I saw a guy, when we were just getting to the restaurant, I saw a guy coming out, pushing his son in a wheelchair on this steep, steep mountain path. And I saw that and I thought, my God, like I felt so guilty for feeling sorry for myself. I felt so blessed to be alive, to be able to walk with my two legs. And it reminds me of one of my favorite sayings. And it said, a healthy man wants 1,000 things and a sick man just one. And I think that's such a powerful concept. When you're healthy, we have all these dreams and goals and desires and wants. But when you're sick, like if you've ever had like a really bad flu or something and you're in bed, you think, all I want is just to feel normal. And just this feeling is so awful. And there is, again, that idea of
Yeah.
just reframing, like, what do you want to focus on? Do you want to focus on the fact that you made a mistake and you're sweaty because you dressed wrong and you're climbing a mountain? Or do you want to focus on the fact that actually I'm in the Italian Alps with my family who I love dearly and I'm in the sunshine? I mean, just be thankful for that, right? So just that idea of just, a bit of perspective, a bit of reframing, it really is such a powerful concept.
It goes a long way. You know, what we tell ourselves matters. And the other, since we're talking about how we talk, you know, another one of my favorite phrases is words are critical currency. And so when we think about what we say and how we say it to ourselves and how we say it to others, it really does matter, and it really does help us. It can help us or hinder us depending on how you want to use those words. So I love what you said, that you just reframed it, you know, to have that experience, to see the guy with his son, and then to realize, wait a minute, you know, we have all these things that we're just focusing on the wrong things, you know. And another thing is, like, sometimes it just doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter that of what we're complaining about. You know, if you think about it, like, what am I complaining about right now? It really doesn't matter. And when you put it on that same time horizon, like, I'm sweaty, I'm going up you know, I'm all sweaty, everybody's tired, I missed the wrong thing. Like, in 10 years, it won't matter. You know, you're having an amazing experience. And I think it's just that taking the circumstance and saying, okay, yeah, it did kind of suck. Yeah, I'm sure it sucked in the moment, you know, to have that. But then to turn it around and look at the positives that came out of it, and, you know, the experiences that you had.
Well, so this will probably be out next week, so it will be before your book is published. But when it is published, send me a link and I'll blast it out.
Oh, that's okay.
And your book has got the same name as your podcast, right? It's Small Steps, Big Wins. And I just love that idea of, so many people think, if I can just take this giant leap to this new level of success, I'll be happy. But for me, I've always found in my life, it's a lot of the small steps that lead to greatness over time. So I love the fact that you use that as your title. And I find you so inspiring, because you have changed so much and you're so much happier now in a short period of time, and it's never too late. So you're such a good example of, your circumstances, your past are your past. You can't change it, but you can make a huge difference to your future just by changing your mindset. And I think you're such a beautiful example of that.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, my book will be out October 1st in e-form, and then October 15th in written form, the paperback version. So yeah, I'm excited about it, to get it over the finish line. It's, as you know, you've written a book yourself, and it's a labor of love, and it's been quite an experience from beginning to end. So I've enjoyed it very much. And a lot of what we talked about is in there. And I talk about regret. Like I said, I had a whole chapter on regret is a thief, and then talked about post-traumatic growth as well. And there is actually trauma that doesn't go to the negative, but trauma that goes to the positive. So we're just, I think I want to leave your listeners with the fact that, you know, yes, my life, I'm much happier now. Not that I wasn't before. I really wasn't before that much, but you know, you can change your life. Anybody can do it. And it did take me a series of small steps. But when you start looking for those small steps, they start growing into bigger ones, and it does snowball. So, I mean, anybody, don't give up. Don't give up, because anybody can create the amazing life for themselves.
I love that, Sue. That's the power of compounding interest, and you're the perfect example. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me, Lawrence. This has been an awesome podcast and conversation. I really, really enjoy talking to you. You make me think.